All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we are talking about the Buffalo Bills, and I am joined by Hansel from Process on Tap podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about football, especially the Bills. This is a fun year for Bills fans. We're ready to hopefully get the monkey off our back this season.
Absolutely. And when we talk about NFL, obviously it is off season, but it really seems like there is no off season in content. Always, something to talk about with the team, especially the Bills. I mean, I have to say, I was rooting for the Bills versus the Chiefs, and that was just it was a tough way to lose. This many months later, has it kind of processed, and is it still kind of tough to kind of look back on that game now?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good way to start. So it's funny, kind of funny when that game happened, the way it ended, and I think every Bills fan will tell you, like, when there was still 13 seconds left on the clock and we had the lead, we were still like, the game's not over. Bills fans know that better than anybody, and lo and behold, it wasn't. The one thing is, from my end, I had a lot of people texting me, calling me, saying like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I was oddly okay. I mean, I was upset, but I was okay. And everyone was like, "Why? Why are you so okay? Why are you fine?" And I'm sure we'll talk about him a lot today. But my response was like, "I got that guy now. Like, we have Josh Allen, which means for the next 10, 15 years, we're always going to be competing. Like, when you have that guy that can do what he did in the playoffs, like, I'm really not worried about not getting back there. Doesn't mean that we're going to win the Super Bowl every year, or that we're even going to win a Super Bowl, but at least I have the hope that I basically have never had my entire life."
Yeah, and when you look at it, I mean, I am a Bears fan, so I know how important the quarterback position is.
Oh, yeah.
And when you have that guy who can do that, I mean, it's just it almost instills a ton of confidence in the rest of the players. I mean, and the fan base, right?
Yeah, and all the players have kind of alluded to that even after the season. Taiwan Jones, who's kind of one of the older players in the league now, he's a special teams ace for the Bills. He's like their third running back, even though he never runs the ball. He did an interview with some people on a podcast, and he was like, "That guy, he's special." And he was like, he came to the team beforehand, and he's like, I'm choosing violence today. And he went out on that field, and yeah, they didn't win, but yeah, it was a special performance to watch. So he picks everyone up around him, whether it's offense or defense. And since his rookie season, and I know a lot of outsiders look at the Bills and look at Allen and look at his rookie season and say, "Oh, he was awful," there were still rumblings within the team and within the fan base, like, wait a minute, this guy might have something different, something we haven't seen before. And again, as a Bears fan, like, we've gone through a lot of quarterbacks, both our fan bases. So when you see something different, it's very noticeable.
And when you think about something different, I mean, how much did the coaching of Brian Daboll play into that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Dable had a huge impact on Allen. I think there's a lot of people that did, right? Like, Dable, his play calling was impressive at times. There's sometimes that the fans will tell you there was some frustrating moments where it's like, "Why are you doing this right now?" I think Ken Dorsey, who's going to be their offensive coordinator this season, he was his quarterbacks coach the past few years, has been extremely important. And then Jordan Palmer, who he went to Jordan Palmer's quarterback camp and honed his craft and literally changed the way he throws the football. And that's when you really saw the elevation of his game. So there's a lot of people that are owed some form of credit for what Allen has done. I do think the majority of the credit goes to him, though. He put in the work. He also just has this killer instinct that is just, I will run over you, through you, above you. I will throw the ball a million yards. He'll do anything to win. And like I said, they didn't win that game, but anyone that blames Josh Allen for losing that football game, I don't know what you were watching if that's the case.
Right. And you look at that football game. I mean, is a lot of that kind of on coaching and on the defense, or what is that mostly attributed to?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know everybody goes to the 13 seconds at the end of the game where they let the Chiefs drive down the field to get in field goal range. And then obviously in overtime, you have the coin toss, Chiefs just run down, score a touchdown. The whole game was an issue from the defensive side of the ball. Like, that was not the Bills defense we had seen all season. I know they were missing Trey White, but they played without Trey White since Thanksgiving. And it was just completely different. It was almost like they were on their heels the whole game. So I don't know if you put the blame on McDermott, the head coach. I don't know if you put it on Leslie Frazier, the defensive coach. I don't know if you put it on the players themselves. Like, I think everybody deserves some form of criticism. I do think a lot of the Bills fans, maybe it's just a loud minority of them, blame McDermott for that 13 seconds, said, hey, you should have done this, you should have done that. I think he kind of fell on the sword more than anything. Like, he took the blame for things that maybe necessarily weren't his fault, but at the end of the day, he is the head coach, right? Like, it is his job to have his team ready, whether or not it's his fault. So I do think it just was, I mean, man, I'm a Bills fan. Like, we feel cursed a lot, and that really felt like a curse. But look, I'm confident in this team. That really stunk. It was a frustrating game to watch for sure, but there's a lot of optimism in the fan base right now.
Yeah, when you see a player like that, that's the leader of the team, face the franchise, this huge contract, he's not settled just to, have that contract. When he's going to go out and have that type of performance, I mean, that's what you want to see in the short term, but even in the long term, that he can do it. And that's why you look at some of these quarterbacks, I'm sure, that have gone through the Bills, in the past, they didn't have it. Maybe they had the talent, they just didn't have it.
Yeah. I mean, we've gone through so many of them. The only real, I think, two that the fan base since, Bledsoe in the early 2000s, the only, or I guess, let's say three that the fan base felt some hope in was JP Lossman, who quickly kind of fell out of the league. Trent Edwards, who looked pretty good for a bit, and he got a concussion, and that kind of derailed his career. And then EJ Manuel, for a while, people kind of hung on to, and maybe in a different circumstance with more talent around him, Manuel could have succeeded. I don't think any of those guys possess the talent that Allen has. And I think Allen's kind of shown that. I do think a lot of fans outside of the Bills fan base will say, well, Stephon Diggs created Josh Allen. And I vehemently argue against that. I do think Diggs makes Allen better. I think Allen makes Diggs better. But to say that it's only Diggs that did it, like Josh's second season, he had 29 touchdowns. He finished sixth in the NFL in touchdowns. People just choose to ignore that. In that playoff game that they lost, where everyone's focused on a lateral that Allen tried to throw to Dawson Knox, which is like a goofy play. And hindsight 2020 probably shouldn't have done it. The Bills didn't lose the football, by the way, in that play. But in that game, he almost had 400 yards. So it's kind of like, I get the criticism because there were issues in his early career, but to act like he was just this piece of absolute trash as a quarterback, it just wasn't true. It's just people wanted to believe that to be the case.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at the quarterback position, I mean, everybody wants to have hope, but then you see some negative things and you kind of like, okay, maybe it's not, as good as we thought. And, when, as a Bears fan, I've seen this, right now I have hope in Justin Fields. He still could be a bust. We don't know. I have hope that he's the right person for the Bears. Obviously Josh Allen has proven that he is. And now when you look at it, obviously with Fields, it'll be very important with the new offensive coordinator, new offensive system, and how that kind of, helps him develop. Now, when you look at Josh Allen, what are you expecting with Ken Dorsey in this offense? Is it going to be a lot of the same?
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting, right? Because Ken Dorsey's never called plays, ever. He's never called plays. So that is I think there's a negative and a positive there. There's some concern that you have a guy that's never done it before, what's going to happen. But there is also the benefit where, nobody knows, everyone knows what Allen's capable of, what this offense is capable of. But now, the first game of the season, they're playing the Rams. What are the Rams going to do? They don't have tape. They have tape on Allen. They have tape on Dable's game plan. They don't have tape on Dorsey. The Bills, on the other hand, have tape on the Rams. They know what they're going up against. So I think there's going to be some early benefit from that, and there's going to be some new wrinkles. I do think you're going to see a lot more running. I guess more efficient running. So a big unspoken thing that they signed was Aaron Kromer's their new offensive line coach, and he's one of the better ones in the NFL. He's very good at coaching up offensive linemen. I think you're going to see a much more physical offensive line. And actually, as a Bears fan, you guys tried to take Bates from us, we kind of fell in love with Ryan Bates towards the end of the season when he really started getting playing time. He really kind of showed out, and that's why the Bears went after him. And the Bills matched because they see value in him, and he signed with Buffalo for 4 more years. So I think you're going to see a much better offensive line for the Bills this year. I think you're going to see a little bit more running. And I think a big part, and we're going to talk about the draft, but like they got James Cook in the 2nd round. He is a receiving back, like a bona fide home run threat out of the backfield. That's what he's supposed to be. With that in mind, like I think you're going to see a lot more of that screen game instead of Allen having to bomb it 40 yards downfield every play and just make these spectacular throws.
Well, yeah. So when you look at, and we can get back to the draft, definitely. How do you see the running back? Is it going to be a committee? Is Cook eventually going to take over, or how do you see that shaking out?
Yeah, so I think like from a Bills fan perspective, so I've always been high on Devin Singletary. I don't really get the slight against him. He's not a Derrick Henry. He's not a Jonathan Taylor. I mean, if the Bills offense had one of those guys, we might be looking at a historic offense, but Singletary is very good and he can be an RB1. There seemed to be this obsession last season with Singletary and Moss sharing, the spotlight. And I do even like for people that play fantasy football, Moss was ranked above him, which I thought was just insane. And I had Bills fans telling me, I'm dead wrong. You're dead wrong. Moss is clearly the RB1. Well, he wasn't. He quickly fell out of favor. And by the end of the season, Singletary was the bell cow back, running 80% of snaps. I think you're going to see Singletary continue to be the quote unquote bell cow back, but James Cook is going to have a role in this offense and specifically in the pass game. I think one thing you're going to see a lot of with Cook is they'll start him out in the backfield and they'll motion him out into the slot. And when they do that, there's just so many mismatches this team can make. Like they're going to have OJ Howard and Dawson Knox at tight end now. So you're going to have those two guys, and then you're going to have Cook out in the slot and Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs on the edge. Like, I don't really know how you defend that with the fear of Josh Allen being able to run the football too. Like the packages to defend that are going to be kind of rough. So I think from a running back perspective, it's going to be Cook and Singletary. I don't really see Moss getting much involved in like the game plan. And in fact, I actually think he's going to be a healthy scratch more often than not.
Were you surprised then when the draft came along that they didn't pick up Breece Hall?
Yeah, so there was a lot of Bills fans that were hammering for Breece Hall, wanted him in round 1. I was fine with them taking Breece Hall, not in round 1 though. I wanted one of the top corners. So the Bills coming into the draft had a near complete roster, like top to bottom, just freakishly good roster with one gigantic glaring hole at cornerback. So Trey White tore his ACL on Thanksgiving. He might not even be ready for the start of the season. Levi Wallace, their CB2, who ended up being CB1 last year, is now with the Steelers, which leaves Dane Jackson, who, if I am correct, Dane Jackson's 7th round pick that filled in as CB2 last year. So he would be CB1 this year. They needed somebody. And, they got Kaiir Elam, who I was very stoked about. They needed that, and that's why I was perfectly fine with them not going Breece Hall.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Breece Hall, I mean, it was interesting the Jets picked him up, but James Cook will, obviously, be a solid pickup there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, as a Bears fan too, I mean, it's easy as a fan to kind of look and say, okay, well, they needed a wide receiver, and then you neglect some of the most important parts of the team, and it's that secondary, especially in this league. It's the AFC. It's a passing league. You really need to shore up that secondary. And I was happy that the Bears did that, and didn't reach for a wide receiver, that high. So that cornerback, so Kaiir Elam, he's going to be a day one starter then.
Yeah, I think it's just about 100% certainty. I think a lot will depend on where he's playing on if Trey White's healthy. My personal opinion and some of the, medical accounts I follow, like Bills accounts, Banged Up Bills, great follow for Bills fans, covers like the medical portion of everything. He did allude to the fact that the recovery is right around that week 1 window, the average recovery. But if you rush back these ACL injuries early and they're not ready to go, the reoccurrence of injury is massive. And the last thing the Bills needs to lose Trey White for an entire season. Can the Bills survive for 6 weeks without Trey White? They have a rough start to the season, a very difficult start, but I trust they can survive. And if they can make sure that he's healthy and good for the end of the season, then I think you're going to see Elam as CB1. If not, I really don't see how he loses out to Dane Jackson, who I love. But I don't see how Elam's on day one starter.
When you look at the rest of this draft, I mean, what are some of the players that really kind of stand out to you that will be healthy contributors to the team this year?
Yeah, so it was a hard sell, I think, for Brandon being the GM of the Bills going to this draft. The roster was so complete. Like, how do you find people that are going to contribute? It's not like we were the Jets that are drafting like 7 people that are going to start day one. The Bills were going to have to scrounge for those starters, and they somehow did. Like I said, Elam be day one starter. James Cook in round 2, he'll be a contributor on offense. I think a little bit of a weird pick was their 3rd round pick, Terrell Bernard. He's kind of a versatile defender. I think you're going to see him in a lot of sub packages. He won't start. Matt Milano is in Bernard's position. Bernard's not going to beat him out, but I think he can contribute. Khalil Shakir, who the Bills thought that they were going to take in the 4th round, but they traded their 4th round pick. That he fell to the 5th. I think he's going to push for slot time with Jamison Crowder. And then outside of that, like, they got, and I know a lot of Bills fans were stoked about this, and me too. Matt Ariza, the punt god out of arguably, I don't know, the best highlight reel a punter's probably ever had this past year. If he doesn't beat out Matt Hawk, the Bills' current punter, something's clearly wrong. I don't know what it would be. So he's your starting punter, and then they kind of filled out the draft and some undrafted picks. Like, there's a lot to be happy about with what the Bills did in the draft and then the undrafted free agents. I think you're going to see a couple of these guys compete for roster spots, the later guys and the undrafted guys, but this roster's so good. It's going to be hard to crack it if you're one of those guys.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the players, I mean, you definitely, especially later on in the draft, even if you have, a roster that's not full, you can take some flyers on some guys that, may have good upside. And it sounds like, even a punter, that was kind of a weakness then when you look at the Bills last year.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, it was bad. Yeah. I think the last game of the season against the Jets, Matt Hawk had 3 punts that traveled under 20 yards. And actually almost kept the Jets in that game, which was a little weird, like, way to end the season. When the Bills were in a situation where if they won the division. If they lost and the Patriots won, they lost the division. So it was a game the Bills essentially needed to win. And to have Matt Hawk almost cost us that game, it kind of put the Bills fans into a bit of a spiral where they're like, we need a punt. Like, we need somebody else. We can't have this guy punting.
When you look at the offense, we talked a little bit about Stephon Diggs. I mean, is there something more that he can do, with this offense? And then were you surprised kind of with the emergence of Gabe Davis then as well?
Yeah, so Gabe Davis has flashed for his first couple seasons here. Like, he has these plays where you're like, whoa, like toe tap sideline catches that are just mind boggling. I know that he kind of had his coming out party against the Chiefs where he scored 4 touchdowns in the playoffs, which is an NFL record. But I think Bills fans have seen a lot in him. It was kind of a weird thing this offseason when they signed Emmanuel Sanders. Bills fans were excited to have Sanders, but knew that it was going to take snaps away from Davis, who Bills fans wanted to see. Now Davis is the bona fide wide receiver too. Like, he is going to be the outside guy along with Diggs. And then you're going to have Crowder on the inside, with a couple other pieces like Isaiah McKenzie and Khalil Shakir. But I think this receiving core can be better than years past. One thing that I've kind of been outspokenly concerned about is the loss of Cole Beasley. I think he was a extremely important part of Josh Allen's game, just because he was so good at getting open in the short and intermediate range. Like, his feet are so quick, his hands are so good that when Allen panicked, like, Diggs isn't open, Davis isn't open, Dawson Knox isn't open, he's got pressure in his face. He knows he can look to Cole Beasley and say, you're wide open, I can just feed you the ball. I actually think, and I know that there's some off the field, whatever with Cole Beasley, but for a young quarterback, he is the perfect guy because he is that perfect pressure valve. Maybe, or I like to think that Allen's past the need of that, and I think Jamison Crowder can fill in nicely. I don't think Crowder is going to be as good as Cole Beasley, but with the emergence of the other options on this team, as well as I think Allen's just going to keep getting better, which is kind of crazy to say. I think the Bills' passing game gets better this season, which is incredible.
Well, yeah, and obviously it depends on Josh Allen and kind of that offense, but when you have all these weapons, that's a huge part of it. And one of the big weapons, obviously, is Dawson Knox. And when you look at him, where does he rank among tight ends in the NFL in your estimation?
Yeah, so that was also a debate within the fan base, and I've seen a couple fans try to put him like top 5, and I'm not ready to go there. He's getting better. That's the most important part. Like he isn't getting worse. He's not staying still. Like he's getting better each season. So that's something to be exciting about. So I think at one point in time, he maybe cracks the top 5. My concern is I don't know how the Bills afford him with like the cap issues they're going to have in the future here, but he's not better than Travis Kelce. He's not better than a Darren Waller. Those guys are like better, but Knox kind of fits this team well. And I think a big reason he's so, potent in this offense is because there's so much focus on Stephon Diggs. There's so much focus on containing Josh Allen when he runs. He ran for 700 yards last season. So when you have all the focus on that, you're going to have to put somebody one-on-one with Knox. And what are you going to do? You're going to put a linebacker on him. He's bigger than a linebacker. You're going to put a safety on him. He's bigger than the safety. And he's faster and he's athletic. And now they bring in OJ Howard and they're going to line up in 2 tight end sets. I know OJ Howard hasn't lived up to, I think he was the 9th overall pick or something like that. He hasn't lived up to that hype, but I mean, on this Bills team, I don't really know what teams are going to do when they line up with 2 tight ends, and you can go big packages against them, put 3 linebackers on the field, but then you're going to have to cover those 2 tight ends and you're going to have to spy Allen. There's a lot of mismatches for this team to have.
Yeah. When he got hurt, I mean, and you look at the difference between the offense when he got hurt and before. I mean, what was that? I mean, were they just able not to do as much as they had been doing with him out?
Yeah, they lost. They did lose a weapon, and the one thing Knox gives them that they didn't really have was they don't have that big guy that Allen can throw to. Yeah, if Stephon Diggs is running down the field and Allen throws a 60-yard pass, Diggs is probably going to manhandle the corner and go up and take the ball. But then when you get down towards the red zone, the Bills don't have that big guy to go get the football that they can throw the jump ball to. And Knox was that guy. That's why he had, I think, 9 touchdowns in the regular season, maybe 10, something like that. So the loss of Knox was big. I do think that's part of this double down now with OJ Howard. It's like, okay, if one goes down, we still have that big guy because they're still not big on the outside. Davis and Diggs aren't big. Crowder's not big. Shakur's not big. McKenzie isn't. Their receivers are not big. It's their tight ends that are those guys you're going to have to deal with in the red zone.
Absolutely. And when you look at, obviously I'm sure you've had a chance to, look at and react to the schedule. And you talked about it being, brutal, start to the season. What are your, expectations for record wise? And and what is the path then obviously back to the playoffs for the Bills?
Yeah. So I expect a lot from this team, as I do think all Bills fans do as well and should. I really do think that a successful season in years past was make the playoffs. A successful season in years past was win the division, win a playoff game. A successful season now is win the Super Bowl. That's a successful season for the Bills. Anything short of that is going to be, they're the odds-on favorite to win the whole thing. So if they don't, Bills fans are going to be let down, which is kind of crazy to say after the first, 30 years of my life, knowing that was never going to happen. But with that in mind, from the schedule perspective, I think one thing you're going to see a little different of this year. So the Bills had a gigantic letdown against the Jaguars in the regular season, which was a super embarrassing loss, one that's still talked about. How did the Bills lose to the Jaguars? I think that times the Bills did take their foot off the gas. I think that was purposeful at times to
Mm.
not show too much. They didn't want to show too much because they were like, we're going to get to the playoffs. We're going to compete for hopefully a Super Bowl. So let's not kind of show our hand. And then when they had to turn it on at the end of the season, when it was neck and neck with the Patriots, the Bills essentially said, all right, enough's enough. Let's go win this thing and let's just dominate. And they did. They ended the season on a hot streak, just dominating teams. You know, played the Patriots in that first round of the playoffs and had a perfect game, literally scored on every single possession, never saw a fourth down. Josh Allen had more touchdown passes than he did incompletions. Incidentally, I'm wearing a shirt that is all of the drives on the perfect
Nice.
game. So I do think you're going to see a little bit more of no nonsense from this Bills team. They're going to handle business. They're not going to take a Jaguars team lightly this season. They're going to say, nope, we're going to go and beat you by 40 if we have to. But I do think they are going to have to hold some stuff back because at the end of the day, the goal for this team isn't just to make the playoffs. It's to go a lot further than that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the start of last year, I mean, obviously it was a similar kind of, we want to get to Super Bowl, we want to take that next step, and then it was just kind of like for a while. I mean, were you, as a fan and covering the Bills, were you worried that at some point they wouldn't make the playoffs? Number one, and then number two, how do they avoid that type of thing this year?
Yeah, I don't think I was ever worried about the playoffs. There was a point in time when I did say maybe the division isn't going to happen and somehow the Patriots are going to steal this from us. But I was never worried about them not, because at the end of the day, I knew if they had to turn it on, they could. That first game they played against the Steelers last year, had they played the Steelers at any other point in the season, they're beating the Steelers. It was a week one weird situation. And I think you'll see that happen again this year with some teams, hopefully not the Bills, where week one's just going to be this weird, like, oh my God, this team won, this team lost. Like, so when it came later in the season, I know that a game a lot of other fan bases will point to as well was like the Bills played the Patriots. Mac Jones threw 3 passes and the Patriots beat the Bills. I watched that whole game. It wasn't like the Bills got absolutely dominated like teams or other people are saying. The Bills lost that game and the Patriots won fair and square. But it took a like literal bomb cyclone, like the storm of the century to stop Josh Allen. Outside of that, for instance, like Bill Belichick's never stopped Josh Allen in regular weather. Like he can't. He's not capable of this version of Josh Allen of stopping him. So when I think about the Bills and think about like their path back to the playoffs, it's do what they did last year, but just a little bit more in the regular season, because I think one key that they've been missing these past 2 seasons to get that next step is they need home field advantage for that throughout the whole playoffs, and they want that 1 seed.
And yeah, and obviously you talked about the division. I mean, what team worries you the most in the division?
Yeah, so I have to say the Dolphins, just because their roster is just insanely good. It's their roster, top to bottom, is arguably one of the best rosters in the NFL. It's stacked with talent. Not a lot of depth, but a lot of talent. The only reason they're not a gigantic concern to me, right? So they're my top concern in the division, but not a gigantic. I don't believe in Tua at all. I actually rile up Dolphins fans from time to time on Twitter with some silly stats about him, but yeah, Tua isn't. I've watched enough of Tua, and I've seen what he's done against the Bills. Granted, without Tyreek Hill, and Tua is just not it. Like he's not the guy that's going to be able to go toe to toe with a Josh Allen, with a Patrick Mahomes, with a Tom Brady, regardless of who you put around him. I do think a dark horse team, which I don't know how many people outside of the AFC East fan bases are paying attention to, is the Jets. Like they had a great draft. They had a great offseason. They have a good roster, like a sneaky good roster. They could push the Dolphins for that second spot. I'm not saying they will. I expect the Dolphins to compete for a playoff spot, but the Jets could be right there, which leaves the craziest statement of all. The Patriots do not concern me in any way. I think they might be the worst team in the AFC East. They might finish behind the Jets in 4th place. Like that's crazy to say.
Yeah.
And I think part of it too is like, I know that a lot of people liked Mac Jones. He played 3 games against the Bills. The 1 game they won, he threw 3 passes. He didn't need to be on the field. Like any quarterback could have done that. In the 2 other games they played, he was a non-factor. He was just a meaningless quarterback. He wasn't capable of doing anything. He again cannot go toe to toe with Allen. So in the division itself, my rank of concern, and I know it sounds crazy, and I know it sounds like maybe I am a jaded fan from all the years of the Patriots just shoving it down my throat. But honestly, I go Dolphins 1, Jets 2, Pats 3. That's my level of concern.
It's interesting you bring up the Jets. I had a chance last night to talk to Ray from the Jets Lounge, and when we talked about it, the roster and really, yes, I mean, defensively they've really kind of done a good job, and then offensively they've really surrounded Zach Wilson with the weapons, and this is the year where we see, does he take that next step? And I guess my question then is where do you rank these division quarterbacks? Obviously, Josh Allen is, head and shoulders number one. So where do you rank the rest of the quarterbacks in the division?
Yeah. So I've done this exercise on Twitter as well at points, but let me do it in two ways. Let me do what I believe they currently are and what I believe their potential is. So what they currently are, I cannot say Mac Jones is worse than Tua or Zach Wilson. I think Mac Jones is the second best quarterback in the division. And then I was not impressed with Zach Wilson last year. I was actually very underwhelmed by him. I thought he struggled a lot and he looked really bad at times. So then I'd go Tua and then I'd go Wilson. My only thing is from a potential perspective. So the potential I can see just because of the intangibles these guys have, the physicality or the processing that I've seen in games. I honestly would go Zach Wilson 1, Mac Jones 2, Tua 3. Like I think Zach Wilson could, and he has to put a lot together to get to that level, but he could be a good quarterback. I do think Mac Jones' ceiling is limited, but he was good last year. Like I can't lie and act like he was a bad quarterback in the NFL. It's just Tua to me is, man, he just doesn't. There was a Patriots cornerback last year that said if you stop his first read, he cannot complete a pass. And wow. Somebody showed a video of it, actually broke it down. And literally, if you stop his first read, he panics and doesn't know what to do. And it happened the entire year. He didn't get better, and that's his second season. So now in his third season, how are we supposed to expect that is going to get better? I know that they went and got Teron Armstead to help at left tackle to protect him. I know they got Tyreek Hill. I know they got Cedric Wilson. Like they surrounded him with pieces, but that like panic and that mode, I don't know how you coach that out of somebody. And one other point too, like they got Teron Armstead, who's a great player. He's injury prone, but he's an incredible player. He's their left tackle. That's not his blindside tackle. Tua's lefty. So his blindside is his right tackle, who's I forgot who their right tackle is. I think Hunt maybe, or he might be the guard. But either way, they're paying a fortune for a strong side tackle. Not his blindside where he needs more help. So I don't see it with Tua, and I'm not scared of the Dolphins. I know Dolphins fans like to say they live rent free in my head. They are of no concern to me at all.
So you talked about Tua's struggles, and how does that compare to what Josh Allen went through in kind of taking the next step?
Yeah. So Allen. So if you go back to Allen's rookie season, I think the first thing I think fans outside the fan base need to do is look at the roster around him at that time. None of his skill players are basically in the NFL at this point in time. Absolutely none. And most of the offensive line is not in the NFL. Zay Jones was his best receiver. Zay Jones is not a good receiver. No. He had flashes. He did struggle. Like I can't again lie and say he didn't struggle at times. There were passes he threw where like, man, what are you doing? There was one where he was getting tackled on the right sideline, like literally falling down, and he kind of hooped it over his head just for an easy interception. And that was one of those ones where you're like, okay, you got to get rid of that at some point in time. But then each season he slowly got better. The second season they got him John Brown and Cole Beasley, who aren't world beaters. Like they've never been world beaters. They're good receivers, but not these incredible players. And then all of a sudden you started seeing a little bit more and you started seeing it click. And then they brought Stephon Diggs, and then you saw this beast become unleashed his third season where it was just like he was unstoppable at times. And then last year, same thing. I know people tried to say he regressed. He did it. It statistically regressed during the regular season. But again, I do think the Bills were playing a vanilla style offense. They're like, all right, Josh, don't run it too much unless you have to. We're not going to run these crazy design plays. And then you saw what happened when he got to the playoffs. He had 9 touchdown passes in 2 games. He had literally a perfect game in his first game. He went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes in arguably one of the best playoff games we've ever seen in history. And Josh Allen also has the highest passer rating in playoff history right now. So when it comes down to it, like, I've seen progression year after year. With Tua, I haven't seen progression. I just see like the same like rookie mistakes. And I know he's been injured, but that's also another thing the Dolphins fans don't want to talk about. He's injury prone. He came in the league hurt. He's been hurt each of the past 2 seasons. Why is that? Just like, we can't just ignore that. He could get hurt again. I'm not wishing that to happen to him, but he's just not inspiring. There was one play I'll bring up. It was in his rookie season. So the Dolphins had to win against the Bills to get into the playoffs. They didn't. The Bills put up 56 points on them. But at one play, Tua's running for the end zone, and there's one guy in front of him. And in a must-win game, what I expect of my quarterback, at least I'm used to it now with my guy, is he's going to lower his shoulder and try to run through you. Tua slid short of the end zone. And I remember watching that and saying, that just like, there's something not there. There's not that extra, like, I will do anything. And luckily enough, as a Bills fan, I have the guy that will literally do anything.
Well, yeah, and I actually thought you were going to bring up the point where there was the one play where you thought he was going to run and he could have gotten a first down, and then he like threw it and it was just not anywhere near a receiver. Yeah. So he has that. What would be an interesting, and maybe put this on Twitter too, if Dolphins fans would rather go with Tannehill now.
Petty. Oh, Tannehill. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's
a good one. I think that there's at least from perusing their Twitter from time to time and their subreddit, they seem to be drinking the Tua Kool-Aid. But if they were being honest with themselves, I do wonder if they'd say, this season, at least this season, would you rather have Tannehill? I mean, I would rather have Tannehill this season.
Yeah, that's interesting. And this is going to be the year, and you have to, as a fan, you have to have some bit of optimism. But you do have to have that cynicism as well and see, okay, what has this quarterback done for us lately? And he's had opportunities. This is going to be the year for them. I really like that Jets pick. That'll be interesting because really not much is expected from them this year. And that's sometimes when teams can really sneak up on others.
Yeah. And I have a couple of friends that are Jets fans. And the good thing is, I think the normal Jets fan has reasonable expectations this season. They don't expect the playoffs. They expect a few more wins. They expect to compete game after game, but they all know, and what Jets fans should want is Zach Wilson has to improve. If he doesn't improve, then everything they've done, just throw it in the garbage. It's done. You have to start all over again. So as long as Wilson improves, it's a successful season. Where kind of the Dolphins are in a different spot. Like, Tua has to improve. If he doesn't improve, he's out of the NFL. But if he doesn't improve, literally, like, it is going to be a huge letdown. They should be competing literally for the division if it wasn't for the quarterback. But I don't really see them competing. They should, if they don't compete for a wild card spot, I mean, Tua is done at that point.
When you look at their coach, I mean, they should be able to kind of do some different things offensively to, obviously, hopefully use his strengths. In Tyreek Hill. I mean, that's going to be interesting, that whole kind of mix in the locker room as well. But, back kind of talking about the Bills, on the other side of the ball, talk about, maybe this addition of Von Miller and what he's going to mean to this defense. And then eventually when Tre'Davious White does return to health, I mean, is this going to be one of the best Bills defenses that we've seen?
Yeah. So the Von Miller thing was huge. So during the offseason, I think we were being told by, people in the know that the Bills are going after a big name pass rusher. The one everyone was mentioning was Chandler Jones. Like, the Bills are going to go after Chandler. I think he's from Rochester. He's from Western New York. So that was the thought. And then he signed with the Raiders. So at that point in time, it was like, all right, who are we going to go get? And Von Miller wasn't on many people's radars at all. The presumption was he was going to go back to the Rams, or he was going to go back to the Broncos, one of those two, especially after Wilson went to the Broncos. I actually didn't even realize I had somebody told me, they're like, they texted me and said, Hans, the Bills just signed Von Miller. And then I checked Twitter and it's like, oh my God. Miller, that was a huge moment. I've argued
Mhm.
for actually starting, earlier last year. I said the Bills have to make a Super Bowl move. Like there's always a move some team makes where it's that they did that thing that puts them over the top. Von Miller's that move. Like he's that
Mhm.
guy. I know people say he's in his early 30s, so he's old for an NFL player. He's still extremely talented, and he made the Rams better. He was part of the reason the Rams won the Super Bowl. Aaron Donald credits him with making Aaron Donald a better football player, which is
Mm.
insane because Aaron Donald's so good. Von Miller's going to take a super young Bills defensive line, like Ed Oliver's young, Greg Rousseau, Boogie Basham, AJ Epinesa, and he's going to make them all better. And people are going to have to respect Von Miller. Like Ed Oliver, who's their three tech defensive tackle, he's constantly double teamed because teams didn't really have to worry about the pressure from the edges. And that's no slight to Jerry Hughes, who's a Bills fan favorite. But he's not the same as Von Miller. Now
Mm.
people are going to have to either double Von Miller or double Ed Oliver. Greg Rousseau is going to be one-on-one after his first year in the NFL, where now he's going to bulk up. They went and got a guy named Tim Settle, who Washington Commanders fans were super upset about losing, who was behind a really good depth chart there. They just have the pieces to create pressure and get sacks. So a huge part of their problem the past couple of years is they'll get pressure. They're one of the best pressure teams in the NFL, but they don't get sacks. They just don't bring down the quarterback. That's the reason they lost to the Chiefs. Like if you go back and watch that game, countless times they had Patrick Mahomes bottled up. They're going to take him down, and Mahomes just escaped and got away. If they convert a couple of those, they win that football game. That's why they got Von Miller. And then you bring back Trey White, who is just he is a dominant force at cornerback. The Bills played zone defense. They played a scheme called Palms, which is super unique. For people, I think Micah Hyde's the most important part of this defense, but I won't go too far down that rabbit hole. Losing Trey White was huge, though, because quarterbacks had to fear throwing to his zone just because he was so good in it. And he could also body receivers, and he'd get his hand in there. And then you go from Trey down to Levi. Levi was fine, but then you bring Dane Jackson on the field. And to lose an all-pro is a massive loss. To now, essentially, the Bills are going to get back Trey White at some point, so they're going to get an all-pro. They have a first-round corner that's going to play opposite of him, and then they also bring in Von Miller. The rest of the defense is exactly the same. This is going to be a better defense than you've seen the past 5 years from the Bills, and in the past 5 years, they've had arguably probably a top 5 defense each season. So it's a scary thing to think to go along with this freakishly good offense, or in theory, what should be a freakishly good offense.
Do you think the addition of Von Miller will really help Tremaine Edmonds as well?
Yeah. So Tremaine's a very touchy subject with Bills fans. You have two camps. You have one camp that thinks he's a superstar. You have another camp that thinks he's trash. There's a little camp in between there. That's me and a bunch of other people that think he's good. He's not great. He's good. I think the frustration with Tremaine Edmonds is he has all the tools to be a dominant force, and he just doesn't consistently do it. He'll make plays, big plays, and then he'll just get lost on a play. There was a play against the Buccaneers, not the one where Tom Brady threw, I think, to Brashad Perryman, and Perryman ran it in overtime. That was not Tremaine Edmonds should have never been on Perryman. It was a mess up in the zone. There was a play earlier where Tremaine goes to fill a hole where Leonard Fournette's running through it and turned his back and just completely lost track of where he was. Fournette ran it. I don't know. I think he ran it all the way in for a touchdown. So there's little plays like that are frustrating with Tremaine. Where I think Von is going to help that is again, the offensive line is going to have to focus now on the defensive line. They're not going to be able to send a guy to the second level just because they have so much issues on that D line that should free up Tremaine to at least try to be instinctual. He probably is the key to this defense being successful. If Tremaine can have a significantly above average season, that might be the difference between the Bills winning the Super Bowl and not.
So he could really hopefully make there only be one camp then, huh?
Well, I mean, we'll see. I think there's always going to be holdouts. Yeah.
And you look at this defense. I mean, it's Super Bowl caliber defense. Obviously, it's a Super Bowl caliber offense. What would a Super Bowl mean to Buffalo? Number one, and then number two, do they have to win it?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, this fan base is rabid. A Super Bowl would be just God, the city would party for, like, literally businesses would shut down for a week. I'm not from Buffalo originally, by the way. I actually live in Albany, which is 4 hours east of it.
Mhm.
But I've been a Bills fan my entire life. I've spent a decent amount of time there. There's no one like this fan base. I know that every fan base says that, but this is a really special group of people. And man, a Super Bowl would just be. I can't even put into words, like, and Josh Allen's actually spoken about it a lot, and he said he dreams about it, and he can't even imagine what that parade would be like, and he'd jump off the float through a burning table just to celebrate. So I think, like, every fan, every Bills fan that I know that I've spoken to is very nervous for this season, because we're not used to being the team, right? For for the past 20 years, we've been kind of a laughing stock. And now
Mhm.
finally people are like, whoa, you don't want to play the Buffalo Bills. And to think that we're the favorites now, we're not really comfortable in that. We like sneaking up on people, and we can't do that anymore. But yeah, the Super Bowl would be something special. As for your second question, do they have to win it? So I think there's two parts to that. I personally think if they do not win it this year, something needs to change. Like, a big change needs to come. I don't know what that is. I've kind of toyed around with ideas in my head. That I don't really want to say out loud. But yeah, I
Mhm.
don't
Mhm.
know. Something have to change because this roster's too good not to win it. They don't have to, though, because like I said at the very start of this, they have that guy. They have Josh
Mhm.
Allen. So
Mhm.
if they don't win it this year, they could win it next year, and they could win it the year after that, and the year after that. Like, they will always. He should be signed a lifetime contract. Like, the love that this fan base has for him, I can't imagine another fan base in any sport feeling the way Bills fans do about this. Is all the city talks about. There's streets that have Josh Allen signs on it. Like, he is the love child of this city. It's just incredible to watch.
So I'm a Bears fan living in
Mm,
Wisconsin, and it's interesting because you talk about a quarterback that's meant a ton to a franchise,
mm,
in Aaron Rodgers, but it's just not like that. Relationship, and a big part of it is because of Aaron Rodgers, because of
oh,
what he's done and all that, and yet when the team's winning, they're all for him. It
mm.
seems like regardless, the fan base is, there with Josh Allen, and he's there with them regardless, right?
Yeah, actually, they just had a so Micah Hyde, he each year, obviously the COVID years he couldn't do it, but he has a softball game he holds in Buffalo, where the team comes and plays for charity. Um, this year, obviously, they kind of changed the way they're raising money because of the absolutely horrendous events that happened in Buffalo. And Josh Allen spoke about that, and he spoke to the city and spoke about the city and how incredible, this city is, and how he can't fathom it being here. All that aside, he hit a home run in the home run derby, and it went viral. He has, like, this spinning home run. There was 10,000 people there. That was more fans that went to the Oakland Athletics game that weekend.
Wow.
And that stadium absolutely erupted. They went there to see him, and they still also are, like, rabid about their other players. Like, if you ask Bills fans about how they feel about a Micah Hyde or a Jordan Poyer or a Deion Dawkins, like, they'll just, like, gush and gush over them. But Allen is special because of everything he's done. He is the perfect franchise. Like, he hasn't said anything wrong since he's become a professional quarterback. He says everything right. I've never once seen him take credit. Not once. He's never said, that's on me, I did that. But every time they lose, he'll put up that Chiefs game. He blamed himself. He didn't do enough.
Mm.
I don't know how he didn't do enough, but to him, he didn't. So it just is. It's awesome to watch, like, how much the city loves him, and it is win or lose. After that Jaguars game, where you could blame Allen, and Allen blamed himself, Bills fans were like, "No, that's my quarterback. You don't mess with my quarterback." So
Hmm.
yeah, it's awesome.
Is there a team that you're most worried about in the AFC, and then also maybe on the NFC side?
Yeah, AFC. I'm big on the Chargers.
Mm.
I think that they put a lot of pieces to that team. Uh, My question is Justin Herbert, and I think Justin
Hmm.
Herbert's a stud. But in
Hmm.
a must-win game against the Raiders, or not even a must-win, a must-tie game against the Raiders, he really didn't perform all too well. I know he had nearly 400 yards, but I actually pulled up the stat because knew I was going to say this. He had an 80 passer rating. That's not a good passer rating. So he had an okay game. He's got to take a step. Right? He's incredible, but he needs to take the next step, and he needs to will that team to that title in that division, which is ridiculous. Outside of them in the AFC, also the Ravens. I know that they're kind of, no one's really talking about them. I think Lamar Jackson's a freak. I think he's incredible. I do think there are the occasional limitations in the passing game, but there's no pieces around him besides Mark Andrews. But he has that ability to take over a game. Like he can just absolutely take over a game at any point, and that would scare me just because you don't know what Lamar you're going to get. And then on the NFC side, I mean, the AFC is so stacked. It's hard to say on the NFC. I think Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback I've ever seen in my life. I know he struggles in playoff games, or has struggled recently in playoff games, especially this year. But when Aaron Rodgers does things no one else has ever done, or probably ever will do, throwing the football, so I never count them out. And then also, I think Bills fans are chomping at the bit for an opportunity to end Tom Brady's career. So I think if you ask Bills fans, I think they would say, give me the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl and let me be the one that says sayonara to Tom Brady and ends it. I think we would all be terrified, absolutely petrified of that. But we would love every second of it if the Bills came out on top.
Yeah, you brought up the Packers, and it is so interesting because they have a variety of outcomes, I think, depending on their wide receivers and everything. But, when the playoffs started last year, even as a Bears fan, I said, the Packers are going to win, somehow, he just doesn't pull it out in the playoffs. And I would definitely take Josh Allen over Aaron Rodgers, especially in the playoffs.
I mean, yes. So saying that Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback I've ever seen, I'm still taking Josh Allen. I'm taking Josh Allen over anybody. One, because obviously I'm in love with him because of what he's done for the city of Buffalo and for that franchise. But I'll say one more thing. I think when Allen plays at his peak, like when he's at the top of his game, and that includes his running, includes his escapability, includes his passing, includes his physicality and his emotions, and when he's at his peak, there's not a person on earth better than him. I know that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs beat the Bills in that playoff game. I do not think that Mahomes played at the same level that Allen did. Like Allen, if you go back and watch the fourth downs in that fourth quarter, that Allen escaped in the pocket, had pressure in his face, delivered. When he's on, he's special, and there's no one like him.
I tell you what, I really think that Tyreek Hill is going to be missed. I'm actually picking the Chiefs to be last in the division. I just, Patrick Mahomes is special, but he is, but a lot of that was that connection, with Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's able to keep a play alive like no other quarterback. I mean, he just kind of is able to kind of, move around and find space. But if you don't have that connection, I think it really makes a difference. And when you look at the Bills, just what they've been developing with that connection with Stephon Diggs and how Gabe Davis, it just really seems like the table's set. And I hope the Bills break the table in a good way.
Yes. Yeah, I'm with you. The stars are kind of aligning for this team this year. It seems like the storybook ending is there, right? Like it's being written right now. And I just win it. They just got to win the thing.
And I went to Iowa, so I'm an Iowa guy. Epinesa, Hyde, Butker, those are my guys. I definitely, the Bills are probably one of the teams that I root for. I realize the Bears aren't going to do much this year. And when you look at it, I grew up, watching the Bills go to all those Super Bowls, and it just, it was heartbreaking as an outsider to watch. And when you look at, the fan base and just a team that hasn't done it, you want to see them kind of get over the hump and win it.
Yeah. So I'm, how old am I? I'm about to be 31, so I don't really remember the Super Bowls. I've heard stories, I've seen the games. I know that is like just ingrained in the Bills fandom. My first football memory of my entire life was the Music City Miracle. I
Mm-hmm.
remember that. I remember crying. That was awful. There's so many little moments like that happened during the next 17-year playoff drought where it was like, come on, like this can't be happening. There's one, Leotis McKelvin. They're playing the Cowboys on Monday night. He just needed to catch the ball in the end zone and take a knee. He elected to bring it out. He fumbled it. The Cowboys recovered it, scored a touchdown, won the game, which was a meaningless game. But little things like that. They played the Steelers in a must-win game to get to the playoffs in, I think, 2004. And Willie Parker, who was a no-name at that point in time, had 250 rushing yards and beat the Bills. So little moments, 13 seconds now, wide right, like it just on and on and on. There's all these moments where this fan base feels cursed, but they pack that stadium every single game throughout that drought, and they are constantly in all their Bills gear. Like this fan base never left that team. It just was kind of this love-hate relationship. Like, why can't you be good? And now to see this fan base be like, our team's good. Like they're really, really good. They're not just good. They're great. Like there's like an energy in that city too. Like if you go there, that it just, you can feel it, and you can feel the fans, and you can feel the excitement. It's just, like I said, storybook is being written. Like they just have to put the right ending on it.
Well, I'm excited to see kind of where the season will go, and hopefully you do have that ending. And where can everyone find you again?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Uber Hansen. I'm not an Uber driver, but that is my username. You can find my podcast on Twitter at Process on Tap. We post usually once a week. Sometimes there's some weird issues with that. I have a few other things going on. Like if you're a big Reddit person, I help out a lot with the Bills Reddit, which is our Buffalo Bills. I have my own website called billsish.com. I actually created a Bills hurdle or Bills Wordle that I have on there. So I'm all over the place doing things, and always down to do, podcasts and things like this, and just talk football with people. I will say one last thing real quick, alluded to the awful events in Buffalo. If you go to the Buffalo Bills Twitter account, they did tweet out something showing how you can help. I know Bills fans have become famous for their charitable donations. So if you can give back, please, that city needs it.
Absolutely. And with that as well, hopefully Josh Allen can drive the Bills to Super Bowl and really help that city even more.
Yeah.
Well,
sure.
once again, I appreciate you coming on, and this has been NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the Buffalo Bills. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah. Thank you.